A historic rivalry brings out the best in both Gonzaga and St. Mary's, and you know that Graham Ike was not about to miss out on all the fun.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to provide news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, folks. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, you can bet just $5 and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you win. I know our guest today is super thrilled about who is representing the NFC in the Super Bowl this year. Zack Farmer of the unofficial WCC Hoops pod. I know I had to take a shot at you because it's rivalry week, so we got to do it. Zack Farmer's here.
And it's at Levi's.
I know, it's so brutal. I feel for my 49ers fans out there. I'm a semi-Seahawks fan. I wore a Seahawks jersey on a show recently to troll one of our other hosts who's a huge Patriots fan. But yeah, it's going to be a fun game. But I want to talk about this game coming up here on Saturday. Folks, Zack Farmer here of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast, a longtime podcaster about this conference, as well as a Gael, here to talk about this matchup on Saturday night. We're going to talk about Ike's return. So we heard from Mark Few on Thursday that he is back in the mix. We'll talk about Gonzaga's small ball lineup and how St. Mary's might counter that if we see it in this game. And we'll talk some other X factors, some predictions for the game, all that good stuff here. We are live on YouTube. For those of you here, thank you for joining us. Always fun to have some live stuff going on before this game. But Zach, let's start with the Graham Ike of it all. I don't think this is a surprise. A lot of people thought he was, potentially going to come back for the San Francisco game. Mark Few basically said it's kind of a pain management thing for him. I think they felt like, hey, we don't want to risk anything, putting him in a position where he doesn't get to play in the game against St. Mary's. And with the whole week off after that, it kind of allowed him to basically take 2.5 weeks to just rest and recover. Few said he's been practicing the last couple of days and looks like the old Graham and the kind of player we know he's capable of being. I'm assuming that you're assuming that St. Mary's was kind of prepared for a reality where Ike would be back in this game. Is that kind of your sense of how the Gaels have been preparing for this one?
I mean, I would think so, because I mean, you always have to prepare for what the best of Gonzaga is going to be on a given night, especially knowing full week off, everything else. Yeah. And now to an extent, it's like, you're not preparing for something you're unfamiliar with at that point, though, either. Like, you're very familiar with Graham Ike. You know what he brings to the table. You know the challenge that he's going to be on the offensive end. And yes, like, we've seen his game evolve a little bit as he's been a little bit more of a threat from the 3-point line. So you do have to kind of counter with that. But honestly, there was probably more of a bit of a prep because of the smaller ball line and what that would look like. But staying on Ike for now, like, there's no way that you don't prep to have that guy in the lineup, especially when you've had varying levels of success against him over the last couple of years.
What stands out to me and what makes this match, I mean, there's never a shortage of storylines in this matchup, but like, what beat St. Mary's last year was playing the bigs together. In the 2 regular season games, Gonzaga had either Ike or Huff on the floor. They didn't play them together. Now, obviously, they had more size at the 4 spot because they had Ben Gregg or Michael Ajayi, who's playing at the 4. But they were not able to beat St. Mary's with a 1 center lineup until they brought in both. And then they were kind of able to, frankly, kind of expose Paulius Murauskas defensively and take advantage there. And then it was just like an absolute horrific, ugly game offensively for both teams, but Gonzaga was able to win with kind of that 2 big lineup. They obviously do not get the luxury of playing that lineup with Braden Huff out, but instead, what we have seen Gonzaga do over the last 3 games in particular, and parts of the Washington State game as well, is play small. They've played these small ball lineups where Jalen Worley's effectively playing the 5. They had a lineup where they had 4 guys, 6'7", in the game all at once, and it's a really, really, really good lineup defensively. They struggle offensively. They don't really have much of an offensive identity. They kind of do some ball screen stuff, but it's a lot of dribble penetration. It's a lot of contested mid-range shots. It's a lot of stuff that, frankly, I don't feel very confident about how it would work against a really stout defensive St. Mary's team. But on the other side of that, this small ball lineup has been nails defensively. I mean, they have been really, really good at getting takeaways, at getting out in transition. And what we've also seen is that this lineup has forced opposing teams to change their lineup. David Fuchs played 8 minutes against Gonzaga, and he's averaging 24 a game for San Francisco. That effectively lined up with when Ismaila Diagne was in the game, and I think is why Diagne didn't play very much, is because Gonzaga knew it was taking out one of San Francisco's best players. Murauskas is going to play as many minutes as he possibly can in this game. I don't think there's any debate about that. He's the best player in the conference, but I'm curious if you think Gonzaga has the ability to potentially play Andrew McKeever and or Harry Wessels, the 2 7-footers for this team, 7-footers, McKeever's 7'3", if Gonzaga could kind of play those guys off the floor, or if Gonzaga's running the small ball lineup, if they're just going to throw McKeever on the block and tell him to put his hands up and give him the basketball.
I think there's a scenario where it could happen, because the one thing that I don't think we've seen enough of these two do is to be able to defend the perimeter. And whoever they get put on, if there is the small ball lineup, I mean, even the small ball lineup, it's like it's Jalen Worley at the 4, or it's going to be maybe possibly Davis Vogel is going to be at that position as well. Like, those are guys you're going to have to be able to at least like guard out on the perimeter. Now we know like Jalen Worley does not take threes, does not shoot that far out, but he's at the very least going to be able to work you off the dribble that far out and then get his way to the basket. So on the offensive end, I could see like how this is going to end up being, to an extent, maybe an advantage, because we've also seen St. Mary's struggle over the years with more athletic teams. And the one thing that this small ball lineup for Gonzaga provides is a more athletic group. You think about, again, like if you throw in a Jalen Worley, if you have a Emmanuel Innocente in there, I mean, the one thing I keep thinking about is that, I mean, Tyon Grant Foster is still a part of this, and he has success against St. Mary's, and he knows what this lineup he knows what the system looks like. He's had to play it against it before. And yes, it is a different team, different squad, different personnel that he's facing this time around, but there is at least some level of familiarity on that. And the St. Mary's team a lot of the pieces are young. I think there's some that you have to kind of be reminded that the St. Mary's team is still learning. The St. Mary's team, outside of Harry Wessels, who's the lone senior, is still a younger team. And the one thing, I mean, we've even talked about it, is how like the veteran experience of this Gonzaga squad has played a huge factor over the course of the season. The fact that they are an older team, the fact that they are one that kind of knows where they need to be, knows their roles. I think that the small ball lineup will definitely see. Is there a chance they play them off? Absolutely. Now, I think what can keep them on the floor is, to your point, if Andrew McKeever is just camping down there and getting whatever he wants, you're going to have no choice but to actually kind of switch that. The Gonzagas will have no choice but to switch it up. Have to use Diagne at some point just to give them a different look, even if it's like, hey, it's like, I don't know like how much Graham Ike is going to be able to guard him either, just because of the height difference. I mean, 6'9" to 7'3" of like McKeever can literally just turn around and just like, okay, just like throw it in the basket. There's just no way you're going to be able to block him. But at the same time, we've seen McKeever get a little bit kind of like, not to say glassy-eyed, but like there's been a couple of moments against tougher teams where teams have figured out how to maneuver around him and get him out of position enough that he becomes a little bit more ineffective.
Yeah. I think the Diagne of it all is an interesting wrinkle in this game too, because it seems counterintuitive to say that the lone 7-foot player on Gonzaga's roster may be a bad matchup in a game against a team with 2 7-footers, but Diagne is so foul prone, and St. Mary's is literally the best free throw shooting team in the country, and Murauskas gets to the line 7 times a game. Like, I think you have to use Diagne, like you said, but I think there's a reality where Diagne plays 8 to 10 minutes in this game because he already has a couple of fouls. And you kind of just got to take that, because you need his size and you need you need the depth. You need his body out there, because Graham Ike, there's no indication he's going to be on a minutes restriction necessarily, but you got to assume that he's not going to play he's averaging 25 minutes a game. So that's what he gets to normally. And I think that would probably be on the high end of what he'd play in this game anyway. So yeah, I'm curious. The Diagne of it all, I think, is one of many interesting wrinkles in this game. And that's kind of where I want to go next, Zach, is kind of what are some of the other X factors? We know EK's return is significant. I think that's pretty obviously a huge part of this matchup, but what else might kind of come into play in this game on Saturday night? We're going to talk about that and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, it is the last call for football over on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on all the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. It's Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it all with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, the Seattle Seahawks, whether you're riding with those New England Patriots, or you're just building one last same game parlay, this is the game that everybody has been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff all the way to that final whistle. And if you're a new customer, folks, you can bet just $5 and you will get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Again, before we get to Super Bowl Sunday, we got the Gonzaga Super Bowl but against St. Mary's. And right now on FanDuel, Zag's 10.5-point favorite. Zach and I are going to discuss that at the end of the show. Zag's also at minus 690 on the money line. So, folks, make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the NFL season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Folks, today's episode also brought to you by Doer. I've always had issues finding jeans that are actually comfortable enough for me to wear. And that's why I'm so excited to get my new pair from Doer. It's this local company, and they have the most comfortable jeans, no matter what style, and for really any occasion. Whether it's a quick trip to the grocery store, a night out with your friends, maybe you're making the trip to the Kennel to go see this epic game on Saturday. Doer jeans have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim, and they're antibacterial, which means that your jeans stay fresh longer, so you can wear them more and wash them less. Doer is also made with Cool Max that regulates your body temperature and wicks moisture to keep you cool and comfortable as the temperatures change. Doer are pioneers of blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. In fact, they invented the original performance denim. Simply put, Doer makes the world's most comfortable pants, and you don't have to sacrifice style. So get a pair for yourself or as an amazing gift. Go to shopdoer.com/LockedOnSeattle and you'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. Doer.com/LockedOnSeattle. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, still joined by the great Zack Farmer of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. And we're still talking about Saturday night's battle between the Zags and the Gaels at the McCarthy Athletic Center, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. And Zach, we talked a little bit about the Graham Ike of it all, his return, what that means for Gonzaga, the potential for them to be able to play their more traditional low post oriented offense, as well as these small ball lineups that have been very successful, at least defensively, in the last couple of games. But what I want to do now is I want to look at some of the other X factors in this game. And I think there's a lot of different storylines. You mentioned the youth for St. Mary's, obviously the size they have down low. Paulius Murauskas playing like the best player in the conference at this point. There's a ton of different things. So I'm going to throw it to you first and kind of say, what is on the St. Mary's side of things specifically, what is an X factor that you're kind of looking for in this game?
I mean, I think there's a couple of different ones, because you mentioned Paulius Murauskas, and I think one of the challenges for him is that, I mean, the last couple outings against Gonzaga, he really hasn't been much of a factor, largely because St. Mary's did go to that double big lineup. So there wasn't a whole lot of space for him on the floor at that point. But a year ago, he wasn't nearly as a focal point of the offense. So he's going to have to be on the floor. He's going to have to be a big factor in this one. Even like, I think I looked at even the game in Spokane last year. I mean, he didn't get a ton of minutes in that game. Let's see, he only played 16 minutes, 7 points, 2 rebounds in that one. That's because Harry Wessels played 29 minutes in that contest alongside Mitchell Saxon, who was had that like very bad looking 3 in that game. But But I think that he's a huge factor in this one of like seeing what he can do on the offensive end, how Gonzaga is going to match up with him defensively, because he can do a lot of things in the post. He probably shouldn't be taking too many 3-pointers. Keep him inside the arc is where he's going to operate best. How the Zags match up with him, I think, is going to be a factor. And I think it's kind of almost the unknown of the young players for St. Mary's going in. Last year, we saw Mikey Lewis light up the Kennel, 18 points in 18 minutes, and he was the biggest kind of swing in that matchup at last year. But also looking at going into this year, they have another young player, another freshman who's coming in who has done a lot of really nice things, and that's Dylan Shaw. And he can do it on both ends of the floor. He's probably one of the more dynamic players St. Mary's has had in a long, long time. And I mean, I talked with some of the St. Mary's folks. I mean, like this, we go back to like Stephen Holt as an example of the type of athleticism and energy and the type and just the number of different things that he's capable of doing. And he's able to do it. He was able to do it right away. Like he broke into the starting lineup about a month or so into the season. And we have seen he can shoot it from three. He can put on the deck. He's one of probably honestly their best on-ball defender that they have right now. And I think how he reacts in the Kennel, how he kind of handles that environment is going to be one of kind of the turning points in this game, because I could very well see that he's going to pick up whoever is going to be like kind of like the lead wing for the Zags on the floor at any given time, whether that be Tyon Grant Foster, whether that be, I could see him trying to guard Jalen Worley. I could see him kind of trying to guard 1 through 4 as well. So it's like he's going to be kind of all over the floor. And I see Shaw as kind of being the one, if I'm thinking about who I'm watching, it's going to be him.
Yeah, I think Shaw's a great pick for this. I mean, I think Murauskas is kind of the most important player for St. Mary's, and I'm not sure that that's particularly debatable, just in the sense of his offensive ability, scoring ability, and Mark Few was very complimentary of Murauskas specifically on Thursday, talked about how he's grown as a player and how good he is right now. But Few also mentioned Mikey Lewis, and I think he said, seems like he always got 30 against us, and that is how it felt. And I think that kind of goes to a larger point that I kind of want to talk about, which is how often are St. Mary's young guards ready to play? You know, they don't seem to struggle with this environment. Like Lewis didn't, Aiden Mahaney didn't when he was at St. Mary's. Marcelonis didn't really, like early on, like this. Their guards are always ready to go, and I think like that to me makes Dylan Shaw an important part of this game, but also Joshua Dent, another player that Few brought up specifically by name. This is something I always pay attention when Mark Few brings up players by name, because he doesn't do that very often. And about the only team in this league that he does it for is St. Mary's. But he brought up Dent and said, like, I think I'm paraphrasing his quote. He basically said, we shouldn't be surprised that the development of a guard at St. Mary's has been so quick and so rapid, because this is what they always do. But, Dent has turned into a really, really good player. And to me, that honestly, I'm going to kind of combine my two X factors, because to me, Dent is a big X factor in terms of, the ball handling for St. Mary's and getting them into their actions. And then on the flip side of that, I think Gonzaga's young freshman guard, Mario Saint-Supery, is a huge X factor in this game as well. I think Ike obviously is going to be the focal point offensively. And I think Tyon Grant Foster is going to be expected to, and frankly, is going to need to take on a bigger role offensively. I worry a bit that St. Mary's' physicality defensively might make life difficult on Davis Vogel. And if you're only going to get one of Tyon or Davis having a strong offensive game, I think it's going to be Tyon. But I think Mario needs to be the best version of Mario. And he's had some consistency issues this year. I know he was dealing with an illness for a while, but when he's on, I mean, he buried Seattle U at the Climate Pledge Arena a few weeks ago. He had 20 in that game, could not miss. When he's playing like that with confidence, with arrogance, it really changes the dynamics for Gonzaga in a lot of ways. And if he gets tentative in this game, or he gets in early foul trouble, or just is a bit overwhelmed by the physicality of St. Mary's and their pressure defense, I think that's going to kind of wilt Gonzaga's offense. And I can almost guarantee you that what Mark Few's response, if that's happening and if Smith's not impactful, is that Worley is going to play point guard. They're just going to give him the ball and say, okay, you got to go, you got to do it. And they're good when that happens, but they're better when Mario's playing well. So I think he kind of stands out to me as the biggest X factor, at least on the Gonzaga side of things.
Yeah, I would agree, because you're right. It's like if he's on, the Zags become very difficult to beat, and the offense just flows so much easier when he's able to do his thing. And we've seen the Zags offense, like, obviously it's not going to be as good without Graham Ike on the floor, and so we saw that the last couple of weeks. But with him back on the floor, we'll see how many minutes he's able to kind of go. If they're still being a little bit careful about the injury long term, they may not try to push him too hard if they don't have to. So I think it'll be interesting to kind of see how they manage the minutes for Ike in the matchup. And you mentioned Josh Dent, and I think that's was the biggest question going into the season for St. Mary's, was what are they going to do at the point guard spot? You lose Augustus Marciulionis, who obviously was the two-time player of the year. And usually we're looking, St. Mary's has a junior, senior guard, upperclassman guard waiting in the wings who's going to take up the mantle. And we see it over the years. It's like you go from the likes of a Marciulionis, from Tommy Kuzi to Joe Rahan, going obviously all the way back to like the Mickey McConnell and Matthew Dellavedova days. Like St. Mary's always has an older point guard on the floor, and they do not have that this year. They have a sophomore starting point guard, and he really impressed early on, like the way he's able to control the offense. He's a better shooter than Augustus Marciulionis from three. He's one of the best free throw shooters in the country, 90+% from the line. He does still make a few more turnovers than I think Randy Bennett would like him to make. But he gives you a dynamic that I think is almost like a combination. I kind of likened him to, he's somewhere between an Augustus Marciulionis and a Mickey McConnell, which makes a ton of sense because he played with Marciulionis and he's coached by Mickey McConnell. So it makes total sense why he kind of has that look and feel. And of course, for Zag fans, I'm like, that's not necessarily a great combination, because those two have actually had very good moments against the Zags over the years.
Well, we're going to move on here. We're going to give our score predictions. We're going to talk about who we actually think is going to win this game. We're going to talk about that 10.5-point line at FanDuel, how we feel about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about the future of this rivalry. Of course, this is the last time these teams will play in Spokane while they're both in the WCC. But is it the last time they'll play in Spokane? We'll talk about that, some other stuff to close out the show. All that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, this is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on the screen. And I mentioned this before, but one of my favorite moments in a post-game presser this year, after Saturday's game against San Francisco, Tyon talked about how great it is to be teammates with Jalen Worley. He was really complimentary of him. He said, oh man, he played 38 minutes in this game and he was good for all 38 minutes of this game. It was fun to see Tyon kind of express that love and reverence for a teammate. It was fun to see Jalen Worley blush a little bit about getting complimented right in front of him. It's just a nice moment to show kind of the camaraderie and the veteran experience of this team, especially as they were, talking to each other with Davis Fogel, the freshman, sandwiched in between them. It just kind of made a nice present future moment for Gonzaga and kind of reminded me of like how the type of atmosphere that this team is able to create. And these are the kind of moments that remind us what it really takes to raise the bar. And it's that extra work off the court. It's that dialing in all of those extra details. It's giving it that extra fire, the grit, that never quit attitude that we really see in Worley in particular. And folks, Mazda puts that same passion into every single model. Highlights are what makes the reel, but what it took to get there, that's what makes it count. And there's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked on Zag, still joined by Zack Farmer of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. And we're, of course, still talking about Saturday's matchup, Gonzaga St. Mary's, 7:30 p.m., McCarthy Athletic Center, ESPN. It's going to be an absolute blast, as it always is. And Zach, I'm gonna tell you my prediction here, because KenPom has this as a 10-point win for Gonzaga. I think they say 79-69. FanDuel comes out with a 10.5-point line. I haven't looked at other lines, but they're likely in a similar kind of vein there. I do not think that Gonzaga will win this game by 10 points. I do think Gonzaga will win this game. I think we talked about it before we hit the record button. There was a WCC championship like 3 years ago or so where Gonzaga kind of unexpectedly just beat the brakes off of St. Mary's. But I think that's the last time this game has been determined by double figures. And while, yes, I think the Gaels are not quite at the level they've been the last couple of years because they are younger, this is still a team that only has 3 losses. This is still a team that it always plays Gonzaga well. The teams that have beat Gonzaga before have not always been the best St. Mary's teams, so I don't think that is fair. I do think that Gonzaga is in a unique, potentially advantageous position in the sense that they now have 2 offenses that they can kind of deploy and that Randy has to react to both of them. But I would pretty much never bet for this to be a 10+ point game unless one of these teams is having a really, really off year. So give me the Zags, give me them by 5. If you want a specific score, I'm going to say 72-67. But I think it's more likely that Gonzaga does not win this game than it is that they win this game by more than 10 points. It just feels like this is going to be a game that comes down to the final few possessions because that's pretty much what always happens when these teams play each other.
I would agree. Like the 10.5 seems like a wild number to me between these two. And I think it would be different if we were talking about a Zag team that had both a fully healthy EK and Braden Huff, but we don't. Like we're talking about a team that is missing one of its key bigs, talking about a team where Graham Ike is just coming back from that injury. And this is not an easy matchup to come back to. And he's going to be matched up with, at least at the beginning, probably with Harry Wessels. And we know that like there are not that many people who can shove Graham Ike around, and Harry Wessels is one of them. So I do think that this is going to, this won't be like a St. Mary's sort of game like we've seen over the last few years, where this isn't going to be a game in the 50s or the 60s. Like this St. Mary's team can score. This is the best 3-point shooting team in the WCC. This is the best free throw shooting team in the WCC. I don't expect this to really kind of get out of hand. That said, I mean, I made a prediction earlier in the week, and I still think the Zags are going to win this game at the Kennel. I'm kind of with you. I think this is going to be probably, I might go like a 7-point game because free throws late, it starts to separate a little bit more and that sort of thing. But I'm not going to go that dissimilar from where you are. It might be like a 76-69, something like that as a final. Like these teams are not going to separate all that much. And if the Zags are still trying to find that offense, really, like that's where I feel like St. Mary's is going to be able to stay in this game for longer. And again, like, we could be completely wrong on this. And St. Mary's could obviously win this one. They've won the last 2 at the Kennel. Like keep that in mind. And sure, like last year they were spotted 11 points because Joe Few started the game. But this is still a matchup that these teams have been so even over the last couple of years, and 10.5 just does not seem like I would like heavily like take that under the entire time. Take St. Mary's.
Yeah, I'm smashing the under on this one as well. But what I want to talk about now, Zach, is what this game means for St. Mary's, because right now we're looking at a Gaels team that by any bracketologist out there, I've read quite a few of them, nobody has St. Mary's out of the tournament, and nobody has St. Mary's really even on the bubble. They tend to be fairly safely in the field as a 9 seed, 10 seed. Some places have them as an 8 seed, but there is reason to look at St. Mary's resume and feel like this game and the subsequent game against the Gonzaga and Moraga have some real significance for this team because they don't have a quad 1 win as of right now. They're 0-2 in quad 1 games. I think they're 4-1 they're 0-2 in quad 1 games, 4-1 in quad 2 games. So they're 4-3 combined. That's fine. It's not bad, but no quad 1 games. They only have 2 quad 1 games in the regular season, this being one of them. The other one, of course, being the game in Moraga, where Braden Huff may, in theory, be back for that game. And even if he's not, there's a good likelihood that Graham Ike will be, healthier and more, in game shape and maybe playing more for that game. Obviously, the flip side is that game's in Moraga, but it feels like this game's really important for St. Mary's because if you finish the season 0-4 in quad 1 games, you'll probably get them again in the WCC championship game. And maybe you pick up one against, maybe Santa Clara if they play Santa Clara in the WCC semifinals or whatever. But like I don't think the Gaels are in super danger of missing the tournament, but it does not feel like they're not that far away from being in danger. And winning this game puts them in a really comfortable position. Losing this game maybe isn't catastrophic, but it eliminates one of the few opportunities they have to really put that resume in a strong spot.
I'm probably more concerned about the resume than most, only because I have the nightmares of a 27-28 win St. Mary's team being left out in years past because they didn't have the resume or the team or the wins or whatnot that they needed to get in. And you pointed it out, the lack of quad one wins. They don't have one at this point. They only have right now 2 more that we know for sure, and that's the 2 Gonzaga games. There's potential, obviously, for 4 when you think about playing Gonzaga maybe a 3rd time in the championship game, and then Santa Clara in the WCC tournament as well at some point. Those are the 2 where you kind of it's okay. You need something, because I mean, we look at last year teams that made the tournament of everyone complained about North Carolina getting in, and they had all of 1 quad 1 win. And I did go back and look, and no team has been in at large without a quad 1 win. So if you want to look at just like the statistics over the years, like since the net has been implemented as one of the determining factors, guess what? No team gets in if you don't have a quad 1, and St. Mary's doesn't have that yet. So it is critical that they get one of the St. Mary's games, get a win against Santa Clara. And maybe it only needs to be 1 because they have a clean deck otherwise. But I think it's way more critical than maybe some are giving it credit for, because the other games on the schedule, like, they're fine, but there's not that win that says like, oh yeah, that's a team that should be in.
Yeah. To me, I mean, honestly, I think not only does St. Mary's need a quad 1 win, I think it has to be against Gonzaga. Like, I think if they get swept by Gonzaga in the regular season, if they beat St. Mary's they beat Santa Clara in the WCC semifinal. Right now, Santa Clara's 44th. As long as they're in the top 50, that would be a quad 1 game for the Gaels. If they win that game and then lose to Gonzaga in the WCC championship, 0-3 against the Zags, 1 in whatever it'd be 4 or 5 in quad 1 games. I'm not sure that's enough. Like, I think they would be sweating. Let's put it that way. Like, I think they'd be really, really uncomfortable on Selection Sunday. You need to make sure that there's no bid thieves somewhere else around the league, and then maybe you're going to sneak in. But I think that would be a really tenuous resume for the Gaels. I think if you get 1 win over Gonzaga, whether it's Saturday, whether it's the regular season finale, obviously if they win the WCC championship, then they're safe. But like, I think you need one of those games. I really do. And I think it's unfortunate, because I think the Gaels are probably one of the 30, 35 best teams in the country. And I think that would be true even if they do get swept by Gonzaga. But yeah, I think that every year it seems like we start to just pencil or even put St. Mary's in the tournament in pen, and they're a bit more questionable at this point. Zach, last topic here before we move on. This is the last game that Gonzaga will play against St. Mary's in Spokane while they're both in the WCC. They will obviously end their tenure in the WCC regular season in Moraga, which is the perfect place for it to end. I'm excited about that, but I'm curious what you think about the future of these 2 teams playing each other. Because, and first off, I guess I'll ask it this way. How much longer do you think St. Mary's ends up being in the WCC? Do you think there's a reality where they do end up, jumping to the Pac-12 if the Pac-12 invites them? Do you think, I have a feeling, although I haven't seen any specific rumors, but I think the Mountain West is probably going to come sniffing around if they have not already for the Gaels as well. Like, do you see a reality where St. Mary's ends up jumping ship out of the WCC in the next 3-5-ish years?
I mean, I think that's very much I think it's a strong possibility. And there's been way too many rumors, chatter about the possibility of St. Mary's leaving, especially once Gonzaga announced that they were leaving, to not think that St. Mary's is at the very least going to be in strong consideration to go elsewhere. Now, whether that be the Pac-12, whether that be the Mountain West, that's, I think, you can have that up for debate on what's going to be the better option for them. I mean, the Pac-12 on paper, obviously, as a basketball conference, is going to look really good, especially if you add that already strong group, add St. Mary's to that. That's going to be a really, really tough league. You look at them possibly going to the Mountain West that's where I'm like, I'm not as sold about the Mountain West especially when I line it up against the WCC, and you're going to add UC San Diego in a couple of years. So it's like, well, it's like the WCC may not be that dissimilar from what the rest of the Mountain West will be in their new iteration. So there's possibilities there, because the WCC still does have to make it enticing enough for St. Mary's to stay. And I think that's the other component here. It's that, it's like the Pac-12 is enticing, the Mountain West is enticing, but is the WCC enticing enough to stay put? When you look at the rest of the teams that are left, and this no shade to Pepperdine, San Diego, and a lot of the other teams in this league, but when you look around, it's hard to make the case that you can build a strong enough resume, or you can talk about recruiting and fundraising, all these other factors that start to play in of like, is the WCC landscape strong enough for St. Mary's to continue to grow like they want to grow? And if the answer is no, then of course they're going to start to look elsewhere.
Yeah. And of course, money obviously will play a factor here, in the sense that I think it's safe to assume that whatever offer the Pac-12 would give St. Mary's, while it wouldn't be a full share in the same way, I think it would be probably double what they're getting from the WCC. I think that's a reasonable, at least, guess, or close to that. The Mountain West is closer. I think if the Mountain West is only offering you like maybe $1 million more, and the conference, the conference is going to be focused more on football, so you're going to be second fiddle, and the depth, after the top 5 teams is maybe not that much better than the WCC. Like, then I'm not sure you're feeling like we need to jump ship to go play New Mexico and UNLV and Grand Canyon and make $900,000 more a year. Like, that's probably not worth it. But 3 times as much money to play Gonzaga, San Diego State, Boise State, like that is Utah State, like that is worth it for sure. If that is an offer that is presented to the Gaels, I think they'd have a really, really hard time saying no to that. But in the short term, we know that there will be at least a year, probably more, where these two teams are not in the same league anymore. And while it's not the historic, rivalry of like Oregon State football or Washington State football, which have fallen apart and are not playing each other anymore, at least I know on the Oregon side, do you think that Gonzaga and St. Mary's will attempt to keep playing this game? It seems, it's advantageous for both teams. It's a quad one opportunity most of the time. If they played a home and home series, if they played a neutral site, it's pretty much guaranteed to be a quad one game, because both these teams are in the top 50. I will say personally that it will kind of break my heart to see these teams play each other at the Chase Center or at Climate Pledge Arena, or I'm shuddering even thinking about like Las Vegas or the Sanford Pentagon or something like that. But like, from a practical perspective, I very much understand the appeal for both Randy Bennett and Mark Few to play that game. I wish it was going to be at home, and I still think that's a possibility, but I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are on that.
I would want this. Obviously, I want this thing to continue. Like, this is one of the better rivalries out west, might be the best rivalry out west. And I don't want to. This is a game better played at the Kennel, played at UCU Pavilion. This is a game better in those environments. I don't see. I get that there's a guaranteed quad one. You go neutral, but at the same time, it's like, all I'm really asking is for both teams to be top 30. And honestly, that's actually not that terrible of an ask. So I don't think that's all that crazy. And also, when you think about like being advantageous, if Gonzaga is looking that it has to be a quad one opportunity or whatever else, of like, you look at what the Kentucky deal is like right now. And yes, like there's a huge marketing component and about the fan size and everything else that goes into that as well. But as far as like the basketball component, like there's not that much difference between doing Kentucky and doing St. Mary's at this point. And you might it's like the trip will be shorter, the cost will be less. There are going to be some advantageous things to just have it be that version as well. And again, like if you want to have maybe switch it up, where even in the thing about the Kentucky deal, like some of them are at the home gym, some of them are at the neutral sites. Maybe that's how it works out. It's like, okay, we'll do one at the Kennel, we'll do one at UCU, one will be the Battle in Seattle, one will be at Chase Center. It's like, and you start to mix it up that way. So it's, you still get the true home and homes, but at the same time, you also then have the opportunity to have those higher ticket sales, get it out into a bigger arena, and have one of those neutral sites that is beneficial to the resume.
Folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Zach, of course, as always, thank you for hopping on the show. We appreciate having your expertise, your insight. I've now had both of the co-hosts on the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast on the show is Thomas Dunn. Joined me before the Santa Clara game. Fun to have you guys join in the program, folks. That's going to wrap.
I got one note about the
Yes.
game tomorrow, and it's actually a WCC note because it could impact us both. If Santa Clara wins their game against LMU and St. Mary's does beat Gonzaga, neither one of us are going to be in first. It's going to be the Santa Clara Broncos.
Yes. I didn't look this up. I was curious to, though, but maybe when was the last time a team in February was in first place in the WCC that wasn't Gonzaga or St. Mary's? It has to have been a long time. Like, truly, I cannot think of the time it's happened.
I'd have to look it up. I don't know if BYU snuck in there at some point.
You're right. BYU maybe did it, but honestly, in February, I don't think they did. Like, I think it's been like 15 years since that happened.
We need to go back and look, but there's a realistic shot that Santa Clara is going to be in first after Saturday night. Yeah.
Fun one. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Thanks again to those of you who have joined live. Thanks to those of you who are watching on replay. We're going to have a fun show after the game, either Saturday night or Sunday morning, depending on how the game goes and how everything shakes out on that game. But obviously fun stuff. We'll get some more fun shows next week as Gonzaga goes on the road to take on Portland and Oregon State. Thanks to Zach. Thanks to all of you. And as always, and I'm going to end it by throwing this up since I know you got yours with you there, buddy. Go Zags. And Zach's got his Go Gaels flag up as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day.